So I'm from Scandi land. So I'm gonna talk a little bit more about Scandi style, because when I see questions on the internet, there's a lot of talk about Scandi and what's the difference. We have another name for it. We call it underhand casting. It's developed by a Swedish guy called Göran Andersson back in the 80s. It's cut down lines, shooting heads, running lines, and most of all, long leaders. Okay, so it's for the floating lines. We can get into the sinking lines later. So I started fishing yesterday. I'm not making excuses for my bad casting, but my demo rod broke coming out of the plane, so I have a prototype with me. So I'll be casting today with a prototype rod. That'll be interesting. So first of all, I would say here, I came to the Clearwater 15 years ago, and in it, you know, Spey casting was developed in Scotland on the River Spey or in the British Isles, and we're sort of 100 years ahead of you. That's what my idea when I came here the first time, is that they have no clue. But I come around the corner and I saw this nice loop shoot out from the bank, and I said, oh, that's got to be a Scandinavian up there. And I pulled the boat over and said, hey, this is like an American dude. It's like, wow. So it opened my perspective that you actually picked up on us quite fast there. It's pretty good. So I see a lot of good casters here, and I'm just joking right now, and those who know me knows that my demos, I normally try to make them funny, so I hope you'll laugh, at least out of courtesy. So I'll just run through quickly what the general idea of the Scandi is, or underhand as we call it. And the whole ground idea was to move as little as possible. So I normally make a joke about the tax pressure in Denmark is like 50-60%, so you don't want to work too much. That flex the casting. But so when I get into the rod design as well, you need to design a rod, so you can't do this Scandi casting with all rods or all line lengths. It has to be a certain rod action and a certain line length. Otherwise you need to start moving more, right? Because the casting stroke is extremely short and compact. So I'll just run through the setup first here. So the head here, now the running line and the shooting head has the same color. It's really good for demos, but it's right outside the tip here. So the shooting head here, I'm a metric guy, sorry. So it's 10.5 meters. I had to Google it the other day. It's like 36 feet, right? So, and it weighs 31 grams, which is 480 grains. That's what Google tells me, right? So when people talk to me about grains and feet and stuff, and I'm lost. Anyway, so the head is 10.6 meters, or 30, what did I say, 36 feet, 31 grams. It's an 8 weight. So there's a little difference in the US system and in the Scandinavian system. Our rods are rated for a lower line weight, and you put a little bit heavier line on, and that's fine. And it doesn't matter. It's all muscle memory, and if you change things, you have to change your muscle memory. That's the way the things works. So the head here is only 33 feet, but the leader itself, oh, I was stuck on a rock. Hang on a minute. There we go. So the leader here is a tapered, it's 17 feet plus a little tippet on it. Right, so see it there, that's the length of my leader. And that's my anchor when I'm casting. It's my anchor point. So that's the general idea on the Scandi cast. And then of course a running line. And then I change the running line depending on what fly I'm fishing. So yesterday I was fishing skaters, which takes a little bit more resistance from your running line to turn over a skater, so I put a little bit thicker one on. Sometimes I fish mono, not very often, mostly for sinking lines, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So the Scandi cast is basically move as little as possible. It's all done with the lower hand, therefore the name underhand. So just hold the rod into your thigh here, next to where, for guys, where it hurts the most, right here. So the only thing you do is just push your elbow backwards until it's 90 degrees. You see the rod is now approximately 45. That's your starting point. That's where you start your cast. That's where you end your cast. Okay? So when you do that fast enough, you'll see the line is out of the water. Lift. Then you push your left hand out in a half circle. So I'll do it here. You lift, half circle in front of you, there. You end where your left hand, your right hand, your shoulders aligned with each other, and then the only thing you do is push that butt section back to where it came from. That's it. That was how the underhand cast was developed. Then it's morphed into all kinds of stuff. Pushing your top hand forward and stuff, it's fine. You don't have to. You can if you want, but you don't need to. So, I'll speed it up a little bit. So lift, there, sweep, anchor, cast. That's it. So, lunchtime. No. But you saw the line just went back to where it came from. So, lift, sweep, anchor, cast. And the big difference here between if you anchor fly line versus anchoring leader, it makes no sound, right? There's no ripping line off the water out here. So what I do in the summertime, my summer holiday job is guiding for salmon, Atlantic salmon in Iceland. And it's super clear water, small rivers, and they are extremely spooky. So if you make a Skagit cast up there, gone. You won't catch any. So this here is super stealthy, makes no sound, nothing. Okay? So I'll just go quickly through the angle change on the cast. It's just to point your feet in your new casting direction. You twist your torso down towards the line. Okay, strip back to the shooting head first. So my feet is pointing in my new casting direction. I lift the rod. Okay, I rotate my hip. When the rod passes my nose tip, out comes my left hand, anchor, cast. Now the line flies in where my feet is pointing. Okay, and you see I don't move a whole lot, and that's the whole idea. I want to do as little as possible. Okay, and if there's any questions, because otherwise I'm just a record, I'll just keep talking. So if there's any questions, just pop them, please. Otherwise it gets boring for me too. I know it's boring for you, but okay. So any questions, just pop them. Okay, so to make this a little bit, because this is just like this is boring. This lift, sweep, anchor, cast. So there's a lot of ways. I always talk about the lift being the most important thing. I've been teaching this for 30 years, and it took me 15 years to figure this out. Doesn't matter if you fish single-handed or double-handed, doesn't matter. This first initial lift here, getting line off the water, is the most important part, whether you're overhead or underhand or single-handed or whatever you do. That first initial lift fixes 90% of all your problems. Anchor and cast. Okay. So, but you can lift in many ways. And you've seen a lot of great casters today and a lot of various lifts and stuff, and I think it's cool to see, and especially if there's girls on the river, you want to sort of stand out a little bit, and right? So, no. But there's all kinds of casts, and there's snake roll, and there's all kinds of stuff. But where I fish, back home in Denmark, we actually do have Atlantic salmon in Denmark, and they're huge. They're like 40 pounds, some of them, right? But we cannot get in the water. It's deep. It's like super deep along the bank, so you can't wade in. You're standing up on the bank, and you have grass and stuff. So instead of making a snake roll, and this is also a good cast if you forgot your waders, and you're also for trout fishermen and stuff. You want to stay away from the river. You want to stay on the bank. So I'll just show you a little one here. It's a reverse snake roll. There. You push your anchor point out into the river and cast. You can't cast the same distance because most of your line is in front of you, but you can still get a cast out there. Okay, there was just the opposite way of a snake roll. It's clockwise, not reverse clockwise. Okay, so I'll do it again. And depending on how much speed you put into the circle, you could push that anchor point even further out there, way out there, cast. Okay, there you go. So it's just a little, I like these little tricks every now and then. If you know how to do it, you can always spice up your fishing a little bit. Okay. Then you've probably seen the snake roll today, but it's the same. You lift, you build a circle, and it anchors, and you cast. And what do you use it for? That's the big question. I used to work in Argentina, where it was a howling gale downstream all the time, and people tell me, oh, you just make a snake roll if it's a downstream wind. It doesn't help. No, you do it to make it look fancy. No, what you can do with it, especially if you want to cast a little bit longer. So hang on a minute, I'll just step out here. So if I try to you know when you cast single-handed, you want to make a good long forward cast, you speed up your back cast. Right? It's the same with a Scandi cast here. If you want to cast longer, you speed up your D-loop, right? But there's only so much you can speed it up before you blow your anchor and it disappears into a sort of a semi-overhead cast. Okay, so if you try to do this, speed it up, there it goes, disappears, right? Lucky I didn't have a fly on. So I can hide line speed within the circle. So if I do this, there, I still get the anchor, and so I hide my line speed in the circle, and when that anchors, there, it's easier for me to cast a little bit longer. Not that you need it, always, sometimes. So that's my main advantage with the snake roll cast, is that you can increase your casting distance just by speeding up and hiding line speed in the circle without blowing your anchor. Okay, any questions? No? Must be really good at explaining this stuff. Okay, so you can imagine now I was talking a little bit about rod actions and rod design. When you only have the casting stroke is only from here to here, right? It's only this little flick with your lower hand out and in. There's a lot of talk I hear that Scandi rods are tip action rods, which is absolutely not true. It's the opposite. Scandi rods loads much easier down here than up there, because if that was the case, with this little short casting stroke, you would not be able to load the butt section where all the energy is. Okay, so that's a misunderstanding. Scandi rods are not tip action rods. If they are, you need to overline them. And that's been a common problem in the fly fishing industry. I see it. It's fast action rods, and what do people do? They buy a 9-foot 5-weight fast action. It doesn't work, and they put a 6-weight line on it, make it a medium fast. That's what probably should have bought in the first place. All right, so when we talk about rod actions, it cannot be too soft and it cannot be too stiff, right? And you cannot put too long a line on, because then you can't make the lift right. Then you have to go up here, whoop, okay, to get the line out of the water. And if the line is too long, you won't be able to send it backwards just with that little rotation of your bottom hand. So that's the whole idea. Somebody needs to stop me. I don't know what time we're at. I'm just talking. Got a little bit of time. Yeah.
So all the casts are airborne casts?
Airborne casts.
Yeah, they're all airborne.
What do you mean by airborne?
You're not letting the anchor sit in the water. You're always touching the go.
Well, you mean so more like a snap T or a circle C?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. You can if you want to. Okay, you can make the same. There, sweep around. But where I'm fishing, that it's not a very good idea. Right? And it just adds another movement to it where you technically don't need, instead of just lifting, sweep around and cast. Okay? So, but you can if you want to. There's no problem doing that. And it's a lot easier if you haven't spey casted before to do that stuff than Scandi. Or so people call it a single spey, and it's not a single spey. It's the spey casting morphing into the Scandi cast. Now I'm on a dangerous rocks flying around and stuff, right? But okay, so traditionally, spey casting was done with long green heart or cane rods, double taper lines, silk lines, right? That was the history of spey casting. So in order to get your anchor point, you can imagine if you had 100 feet of line out there, and you would lift and you would send this up like this without dipping your rod tip, your anchor point was just going to blow. So traditionally, in the spey casting, if you go back and read the books and watch the movies, there would be a dip there. So you anchored your line. Okay, and that's okay. You can do that. But you can imagine, if we talk percentage of the line length and weight, so my head is, let's say it's 30 feet and I anchor 2 feet or 3 feet. That's easier. Right? I still jet lag, so I need easy math here. Right? So If I anchor 3 feet, I anchor 10% of my line weight on the water that's now inactive. So I need a lot of energy to pull those 3 feet out of the 30 feet I had to begin with. But if you have a 100-foot line and you anchor 3 feet, it's not the same percentage, right? But that was how it was done. That was how the Spey casting was done. Then some crazy Swedish dude comes up in the 80s and starts doing other stuff, cutting down silk lines, adding long nylon leaders to it, not dipping the rod tip, anchoring the line only, or the leader only. Okay, so everybody thought that's a good idea. We'll start doing that with our Spey lines, and we call it a Spey cast, but it's technically not. And now I see the rocks flying, right? But no, but that's the history of it. That was how it's done. So everything's morphed into a Scandi cast, but I can't say that out loud. But now I did. I'll run quickly to my car and take off. Okay, so I need to provoke you a little bit to get you thinking, right? But that's technically how it was. But anyway, so just going back to it, I think this is so easy. When I teach people, it's so. Somebody made a video of me on YouTube saying it's easy. That's why I'm very careful saying that word anymore, right? But if you can get this, lift, just push your elbow backwards to 90 degrees. Just push your lower hand out in a half circle. Wait for that leader to anchor. Cast forward. It's bloody easy. Right? Sorry for my language. I'm Danish. We're not so sensitive over there. Right? So it is really, really easy. And what you do in between here and your sweep backwards doesn't matter, right? I'll just give you a little example. I can lift here, then I can wiggle the rod, push my lower hand out and cast. It ends the same way, right? I can lift here, I can build a circle, goes that way, right? Cast. I can lift, I can build a circle that goes the other way. Anchor, cast. I can lift. This here I do a lot, especially with a single-handed rod and when I'm hitching for salmon in Iceland, like little tube fly skating on the surface. So if you just lift like this, just up, down, anchor the back end of the line, cast. Okay, so I can't cast the same distance because my anchor's not the same, but it's a great cast because your dry fly never touches the water, right? It's a little tip for single-handed casting. But anyway, everything ends the same way. You don't have to change your casting stroke. And the problem with fly casting is that you're talking about muscle memory. 80% of all men, this is a study, I read it on the internet, so it's true. 80% of all men picks their nose when they're parked for red light, right? So it's muscle memory. And it's the same thing with fly casting, it's muscle memory, right? So as soon as you change something, going from Skagit, right? So here comes the sinking line part I was talking about. You go from Skagit in the wintertime, and then you go to summer steelhead and starts fishing, whether it's Scandi lines or longer floating lines, your casting stroke is different. You have to change your muscle memory. That's when it becomes difficult. So if you just do the same all the time. So now I didn't bring any sinking lines. I hate fishing sinking lines. But back home where I fish, our salmon is bombed down to the bottom because of a lot of guys that fish with spinners and worms and stuff. So you have to fish sinking lines. So it's the same thing. So in general, what I say is, so my floating line here was 36 feet-ish. So for every sink rate I go down, so intermediate, sink 1, sink 2, sink 3, sink 4, sink 6, whatever, I cut about a little bit, like I said, 20 centimeters. It's a little bit less than a foot, okay? A little bit less than a foot. For every sink rate, I shorten my head that length. So, because remember, the part was that I had to lift to here. My line didn't touch the water. And you can imagine pulling a sinking line out of the water. It has to be fairly short because the angle is different now. So the faster the sink, the shorter the head. And then I just do the same thing. Sweep, anchor, cast. But then I said I went to mono running lines instead because I don't want to fish a 20-foot long leader on my sinking line. Then the fly's back up where it was on a floating line and the line is down here at the bottom. It works really good when you're trout fishing in a pond and fish with these booby flies, but not for salmon or steelhead. Right? So I fish a much shorter leader. So in order to get the same resistance balance between the running line and the leader, I fish mono. Otherwise, I hardly never fish mono because I fish these long leaders. So it's just another way of doing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just say to me it looks a lot easier. Right? So you move a lot less. So, and like, yeah?
Can you explain that a little more? The switch to mono running line when you have sync more detail?
Why I use it?
Yeah. What does it affect? I didn't quite catch that.
Well, if I had a mono running line on, so, okay, so okay, I'll try to. It's a little hard to do because everything is moving rather quickly. So you could, if you see the loop shooting out there, right? There's an upper leg and a lower leg in the loop, okay? And when that shoots outwards, there's a balance between the resistance up here, the leader length and the fly, and the resistance of the running line. Right? And it's mostly dragging it off the water and gravity and stuff. It's not so much the rings or anything, but it's the weight of it that lifts up. So that balance has to be evened out so the resistance on the running line is a little bit bigger than the resistance on your leader and fly combined. Okay? So if I shorten down my leader, I have to reduce the resistance on my running line. Okay? So you could say that a fly cast is not casted out, it's a drag that pulls it out. So it's the drag from the running line balanced with the drag on your leader that makes the line fly. If one of them is too big, if your leader is too big, it's just gravity is gonna take over and it's gonna rotate the wrong way. And if it's the other thing, you're not gonna cast as long, right? So if I had a very, very short leader in this, it wouldn't fly anywhere, okay? So that's the whole idea. Okay, any questions, just pop them. I'll try my best to answer them. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about managing your running line for long casts?
Yeah. Pull a little bit more out. Okay. Step out here. I just fired this way here. Hang on a minute. So, okay. So when I strip it back in again, the problem is I strip my fly when I'm fishing. I know everybody here told me do not strip your fly. Steal it, don't eat on a stripped fly. The ones I've caught haven't read the book, but anyway, you count your strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hang on to it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have 2 loops, different sizes. Okay, and to avoid my line getting caught on the around the reel, I always run it down underneath. Okay, if you have it here or you hold it only with your top hand, it's always going to get caught around the reel. So just around the reel here. Okay, then it hardly never. If you said never, your next cast is going to tangle out. That's the way it is. But hardly never. So lift there, your back anchor and cast it out, and it never tangles out. Hardly never tangles out. Okay, so then you just count your strips 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or you start longer if you cast much longer line. It's the way I do it, but it's a little harder when I very often strip my fly, also for Atlantic salmon, and it's not because I believe that this little thing here makes the fly move. It's more when you fish these size of rivers, there's a lot of different speeds on the water, and even on small rivers, there's different speeds on the water. And if your fly gets hung up on a current somewhere, it stalls. And if you just pull the other end a little bit, it starts swinging again. And if you're a believer, like I am, that your fly fishes better if it's moving, then just strip it a little bit. It doesn't have to be much, either figuring 8, depends on the speed of the water, right? So just to give you I know in Iceland, we catch sometimes 300 fish in 3 days on 10 rods, sometimes 100, right? So we have some statistic material to base it on. So one year we said in amongst the guides, we said we're going to let half the group strip the fly, half the group not strip the fly. And then we rotated every week or every 3 days. There's sold in 3 days lots, doesn't matter. For every group we changed, okay? So just to see if there was a correlation between stripping your fly and not stripping your fly. And now I can't remember, but exactly the percentage, but it was like close to 20-30% higher catch rate if people were stripping the fly. Right? Doesn't have to be much, just a little bit. Just to keep your fly moving, so it doesn't get hung up on a current anywhere. As soon as it hits the water, especially for the people that comes to Iceland to fish, because they're really bad casters, most of them. So just to straighten out the leader. Right? No, I'm kidding. But it really helps. If you make if you don't turn over your leader, it's amazing how long time it takes before your fly actually starts fishing. Right? It's a good idea to put a skater on and then go out and see how did that cast work, because how long before your fly actually starts fishing. Right? So anyway, that's another story. So stripping your fly, I believe you catch more fish. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah. So hang on a minute. Sorry. Yeah.
In BC, I see before they get to the hang down.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Same principle.
I think it's more. I don't know, but I think so the Norwegians do the same thing. Do this. I think it's if the fish will follow the fly into the bank and it's just hanging dead, and if you do this, you just jerk the fly a little bit. I think I think so. That's my idea. I think it would be. Yep.
Talk a little bit about leader length formula for Scandi. How do you figure out the right length for rod length and head length?
Well, it all depends on the. Well, you can say Pythagoras said something clever about it. Right? So when you lift your rod to 45 degrees, it's supposed to be out of the water. So you can imagine if you're in water to your tits, to your waist. Right? It's a different story. Right? Head length is different. If it's super fast water you're fishing, you can have more line in the air. Right? You get it? So the drag on the line, if the drag is much harder, you can lift more line and have it hanging in the air before you make your sweep. If it's super slow water, so that's what determines my head length. But I would say 13 feet rods, somewhere 36 to 30, metric again, some 10 and a half to 11 meters. I never go above that. But it's just me. But you can go above it if you can do this. Get the line off the water and cast. That's fine. That's the key. Right?
I was referring more to the leader.
Yeah, okay. But that's really easy because they come pre-made. And I'm not joking. So, even though I say I work for Loop, I never talk products during this. I'm not saying, oh, this Loop rod is great and blah, 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 right? I'll be an idiot if I said it sucked because I designed it. But anyway, so 30 years ago, this Swedish dude designed these leaders, and they hadn't changed for 30 years. So I worked for Loop for a number of years, and then I started working for Guideline. And every time I did a demo, I had to turn my back to put a Loop leader on, because they were the best, and they still are the best. I never tried anything as good, right? And I've been looking for other leaders, but they're just the best. I'm sorry to say, but it's the only thing I say that's the best. That's 17 feet tapered loop leader. I use 17 feet leaders from anything above 8 weights. And then if I'm like switch rods or 6 and 7 weights, double-handed rods, I'm on a 15 foot. So they come pre-made. Single-handed 13 foot. Light single-handed 12 foot. And they come pre-made, so it's super easy. So don't make it complicated. You're welcome to try it. So, yep.
After you cast, when do you mend? Do you mend after you let the line settle, or do you mend right away?
Depends. Depends on how fast the water is. So, but that's another thing. We haven't talked about fishing at all. Right there, you can mend like this. But what I see the biggest advantage with these, with the shorter heads and the running line, you can just lift them out of the water. And when I do this in Scotland, people, they're like, it can't be done. Because in Scotland, you make your cast, you stick the rod under your arm, You look in the sky because there's no salmon left in Scotland, so nothing happens, right? So when you do this in Scotland, they're like, wow, it's amazing. But because the running line weighs nothing, you can just lift it off the water, and then you can mend the back end of the head. So I prefer to do that all the time. So when people see me on the river and they're like, oh, you were skating today. I was like, no, not really. I was just sort of mending the line a little bit. Okay, so, yep. If I don't catch anything, which I normally don't, on one, I try to mix it up a little bit. No, but it depends. I think, and I'm not I'm by no means in this audience here any steelhead expert. Right? Most of what I've done is Atlantic salmon, and been guiding it for more than 20 years, and fished much longer. So I believe for Atlantic salmon, there's one speed, and it doesn't matter if the water is 40 degrees or if it's 60 degrees. Doesn't matter. It's the same speed, the swing speed they'll eat. So that's I can't explain what that speed is, but when I see it, I know what it is. You know that? You know how that is? And I think it's the same with these, right? So I tried to find that speed. I'm not sure it works for steelhead. Sometimes it does. But you have a speed that you like, right? And then that's what I try to do. And then, of course, if you're fishing sinking lines, like Scandi lines are normally either triple density or dual density lines and stuff, and so they're a little bit easier to pick out of the water. But then you, of course, want to fish them slower. You want them to sink before they start swinging, right? So that's the monoline. It's even easier to lift up and manipulate the back end. Okay, so I hope that was good enough. Okay. Any other things? Otherwise, I think it's lunchtime, isn't it? Or am I done? Hang on. I got more in my bag. I just want... Oh, yeah. We got 10 minutes. You're not done yet. Okay. So, one little thing. I'm just gonna show a couple of casts here because I know you look hungry, so I'll do it quick. But a lot of times I hear that your anchor point has to be above you. And your anchor point has to point in your new casting direction, right? So you lift, you sweep around, you bring your anchor point up there, pointing in your new casting direction, right? That's what people tell you. And it's true. If you fish poly leaders, or if you fish or anchor the tip of your line, it's correct. You have to do that. But with these long nylon leaders, you don't have to do that. Because you can anchor, if you only anchor the leader, let me just straighten this out again. There. This is going to go bad, I know. Okay, so this is always a chance that I take, but it normally works. Hang on a minute. So, here. So if you lift and you place your anchor square and cast across it, everybody says you're going to get a tailing loop. Okay? So we'll see. Maybe. Lift, anchor square, cast across it. It goes. Wasn't the best of cast. I'll make another lift here that makes it look a little bit prettier. So, we just make a little circle before we do it there. Anchor there, cast across it. Okay. So what does that do? A lot of people were, especially when the shooting heads came out and they became popular, everybody said, yeah, but you need a whole backpack full of shooting heads when you fish a bank down the river, and then you change the head lengths depending on where you're fishing and how much room you got behind you. And it's like, no, you just place your anchor differently. So what this does here, if your anchor out in front of you, square, is that it reduces the depth of your D-loop. Okay, so if I do this, there, you see my D-loop is in there, okay? So if somebody planted a tree there 20 years ago, I'll be in trouble, okay? But if I place my anchor there, you see the D-loop doesn't have the same depth, okay? So the reason why I can do this, it's a little hard to see in this light, but this little thing, this leader here will slide backwards away from my casting direction. You can imagine it anchors like this, I cast that way, the leader is sliding this way and goes up. You can probably see it from up there. if I made the mistake of anchor fly line, dip a little bit there. Oh, that wasn't a good one. I'm not used to this. So I anchor fly line there. Now my line is set. Correct, I get a tailing loop. You saw that. That's because just the tip of my line's stuck on the water. Then it's not sliding away from my new casting direction. It's not sliding that way because it sticks too hard. It's the same if I put a poly tip on. I won't be able to do this. So only because I fish these long tapered nylon leaders, they're going to slide away from my new casting direction. Then you can see I just changed the depth of my D-loop just by anchoring a different spot. It's like, remember when I told you about this back home? Same thing. Just by setting my cast up differently, I changed the depth of my D-loop, so I don't have to do any shooting head changing. So it's just another way of thinking about it. Instead of being too static in your cast and your anchor points and stuff, being able to set your anchor points in various places is, for me, the most important part. It's not always this, right? Some people call it, what's it called, the bloody L or something. I love it. It's great, right? Unless the day you've had too much gin and tonic the night before, it's not so great when you try to do it and you got a knot. Anyway, any more questions? Otherwise, I think it's lunchtime. I see you starting moving around, but I'll be hanging around. You're welcome to come and try the rods and try the leaders, and we can talk about casting and whatever. But otherwise, thanks for listening. You'll probably see me on the river if you hang around.